Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video. I am once again underneath my Christmas tree to do Standout Decks 2023. I'm very excited. I did this last year, but for 2022, I believe. So now I am doing for 2023. This is a tag that kind of started with Julia Peekaboo Rose, but then she recently did it with, I wish I remembered all their channel names, but it's 3 of them and they do it together. I'll link that below. I'm kind of bad at remembering names off the fly unless I'm like really commit them to name, face to name. But anyways, that's not what's important. The decks are important today. So I'm kind of cheating. I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of cheating on this one because you're actually going to see 2 versions of this video. There's going to be a Standout Decks 2023 for Tarot, which is going to be this video. And then there's also going to be a Standout Decks 2023 for the Oracle decks. So I'm cheating. I'm doing 2 versions of this because I honestly could not choose between Tarot and Oracle. And I thought that, I don't know, all the decks I'm going to show need to be mentioned in some way, shape, or form, you know? So I'm doing 2. But today I'm just going to cover tarot decks. I want to start this video by saying, oh, by the way, for those who don't, sorry, I'm going to backtrack. For those who don't know what standout decks are, basically you pick your top 5-ish decks for this year that not only did you use them, but you also acquired them this year. You could do the caveat of maybe you got it late last year and you didn't use it until this year. You could also do that, but all the decks that you are going to see today are actually are decks that I acquired this year and started using this year. So yeah, but let's get into it. I'm going to start by saying I am going to include both in this video and in the next one honorable mention. Basically, this is a deck that I did kind of want to showcase, even though it's not my top 5, because it was very close to being in this kind of top 5. So I'm going to start with my honorable mention today, which is the Lioness Oracle Tarot. This is a deck that I got this year. This deck is by no means new at all to the tarot community. A lot of people have this deck, but this was new to me. This is the box for it, and these are the backs. And the reason why this deck is an honorable mention for me is because if I had gotten this deck, I feel like earlier in the year, and I had used it more earlier in the year, I probably would have put this in a higher space. But the thing about this deck is I got it in September of this year. So, or maybe it was like late August. I don't remember, but I was using it for sure in September. So I used this kind of later in the year. And also just because, how do I explain this? I don't know how to explain this. It's like, this is a really interesting deck for those who don't know this one. It's slightly personal to me because this deck is definitely what in my Tarot My Chart video, I talked about this deck as being a Leo rising deck, basically. I have a Leo rising, and this basically feels like a deck for people who are seen as stereotypically Leo, or like, this is like stereotypical Leo energy, but it may not be like actual Leo vibes. But in some ways, it's still an important deck for me. And I don't know, there's something about this deck that I couldn't like stop thinking about in some ways. Let me put it that way. Actually, at the very beginning of this year, I had a help me choose video, and it was between this deck and another deck you're actually going to see in this video a little later. Now, that deck that I ultimately decide to go with, I freaking love it, and it is one of my standouts for this year. But even though I didn't originally pick this deck, There was something about this deck, though, that kept calling out to me. And kept calling out to me. And I kept thinking, you know what? Shit, I think I do need this deck too. So I luckily saw this deck on Mercari. And so I got a used copy of this deck. But luckily, I saw this deck on Mercari and I kind of snatched it up. And the reason why I say luckily is that at the time of me filming this deck, I believe, is completely out of stock. And I don't know when the creator is putting it back. So I do want to be transparent with that. So I kept thinking about this deck and I decided I would finally get it for myself. And I don't regret that now because I think it's a beautiful deck. It's simple but interesting it fills this like very specific part of me, I guess. So I do like it in that way. But then this is why it's an honorable mention. I think the reason why it didn't make it in my top like standouts for this year and why it's only an honorable mention is because like I said, if I had done more readings with this deck, I think it would have been in a higher place, but I didn't. And because I got it in the second half of the year, I had like a kind of instant crush on it, and I was like using it for a couple things when I got it. But after I initially used it, I didn't go back to it. And I didn't have that call to go back to it. So in that way, I guess it wasn't as like great as the decks that you're going to see. But this is still a good deck. My only thing is, so I have small hands. And this deck, I don't know if you guys can tell, this deck is chunky. It is so big. Like it basically like slides and slips and falls out of my hand. It's also, as you can see, bigger. It is bigger than my own hand. So that's how I can tell you this deck is huge. It's basically Oracle size. But as you can see too, the deck is very thick. And it's not rounded. Like it is, like as you can see, it has the slightest bit. But it's not really rounded. So this deck feels very square or rectangular. So it's kind of a weird, it's more square feeling. But yeah. So that's the only drawback too, is like I don't feel called to use this as much only because it's so like, it's kind of cumbersome. But I did want to show it off as this is basically my 6th position, but honorable mention for the standouts of this year. But I am going to do an interesting thing. I'm going to start in backwards order. So I'm going to start with, I guess, number 5 on this, like the standout deck for me. That's in the 5th position. I think I'm going to go with, yes, I think I'm going to go with this one. Okay. For those who don't recognize this bag, let me tell you what deck this is. This is my Dungeons and Dragons Tarot, and this is one of my standouts for this year. But this deck is number 5 for me for a very specific reason. I edge mine in black. Doesn't come that way. Oh, my kitty Mocha is here. I don't know if she's going to actually invade the video or not, though. But she is here. Sorry. That's why I like stuck my hand over there to pet her. Anyways, this is deck number 5 because I love Dungeons and Dragons. I do. And that's why it's one of the standouts for me. It's also a standout for me because this is a deck that even if you don't play Dungeons and Dragons, if you like fantasy in any given way, shape, or form, I think this is a deck for you because the fantasy art in this is just fantastic. It really is. Beautiful colorings, as you can see, very vivid and lush and just so good. Another reason why this is a standout for me is this, as you can tell, does not follow the typical style of being an RWS clone. It is still Rider-Waite-Smith meanings, but like I said, it's not depicted as a typical clone, which I appreciate because I think for me, the more I'm starting to understand my own deck collection, I want decks specifically that are unique and different and not going to bore me after a while if they're just, a clone deck. This is not that in any way, shape, or form. This is stunning. I don't know. I love D&D. You guys know, I've talked about it before. There was a period of time when I was a dungeon master for a few years and then decided to step back from that only because it's a lot of work running your own D&D campaign, let me tell you that. Because I made mine from the ground up. It was from scratch. And I was with my friends. Really great stuff. But yeah, I had to step back from that. But I still love D&D. I still love everything it's about. Fantasy and all of that jazz. So for me, this is just such a soul deck in that way. Not completely. It's not like the deck for me, but it's one of them. It's up there now. And the only reason I think why I put this at number 5 compared to the other decks that you are going to see is because, to be honest, I haven't done too many readings with this deck. I did maybe a few here or there with this deck, but I haven't done a lot yet. And it's because of that I think for it to have been in a higher place of a standout on my list for this year, I would have had to have used it a little bit more than I did. But this is still one of the ones that I really find myself still gravitating to because, again, and this card, it's like it has some good serious moments, but then you get kind of silly ones like this with the goblin being a chef. I just love it. And this card is so good. So yeah. The only reason why is just I needed to do more readings with it for me personally to feel like it was in a higher place on my list. But it's still amazing. Still fantastic of a deck, I will say. So good. And yeah, I'm just so happy with it. And the edging, I've talked about this in one of my other videos recently, but I'm proud of how it came out because it just feels so good. The only thing about this deck that bothers me is, okay, if you don't know anything about D&D, there's a bunch of different stats that go into your chart. And so some of them is wisdom. So the suits have been renamed. So wisdom is the cups. Strength this time is the wands. But the only thing that bugs me is I think strength should have been for the pentacles. And charisma, which is the pentacles, should have been the wands. I think those personally should have been reversed. That's my only other thing that kind of bugs me. But I love this deck because it has the names now, by the way. If you've seen this deck around before, it didn't used to have the names on the cards, and now it does. So that also, is, just easier to use, right, for anybody. I'm getting all the wisdoms. Oh, the other thing, yeah, intelligence is for swords. So that still tracks. But the rest, I personally think should have been switched around. That's the only thing. But other than that, still an amazing deck. I do want to use it next year for sure, a lot more. And I'm very excited. Maybe I'll do, it keeps calling me to do writing related readings with this. So maybe I will. I do write fantasy, so that's what I mean by that. But yeah, really great deck, but it's number 5 on my list because I just need to work with it more. But in number 4, now this was very hard. I kind of bounced back and forth between this deck and this other deck. But I ultimately decided, so basically positions 4 and 3, they could kind of be switched either way, but I'll get into why I think this deck is number 4 right now. This is the Practical Magic Tarot. By the way, for those wondering, each version of the deck, at least it used to be, comes with its own bag like this, but each bag design is different. So mine just has these cute little trees on it, which are very festive, actually. It's kind of almost like this time of year, huh? But this is a Practical Magic Tarot. This is by Chingay Labrador, not the other one. I guess there's another one, I think. But this one is by a Filipino creator. These are the backs. I kind of don't. This is probably my least favorite part about the deck, only because it actually has its name on it, and I kind of don't like backs like that. But that's probably my least favorite part about this deck. Oh, and some of the majors, but I'll get to that if I see them. But this is a fantastic deck. The reason why this is a standout for me this year, by far, is because, oh, see, like this. This is one of my least favorite cards in the whole deck. It just looks so silly compared to like how beautiful, for instance, the star is, right? But despite all that, this is still a standout for me because this deck is so good. It's collage in a way that I like, where it's not like incredibly busy, but it still has enough interest at the same time. This deck is also a standout because the minors do a really cool thing where each minor has a keyword, okay? So in this case, the Ace of Wands, it says, or not keyword, but like a key phrase. So it says light your fire. Seven of Pentacles, patience, right? Like that works. This card is beautiful. It's a deck that's like both playful, but it also at the same time is very deep. Very, very deep in like almost like poignantly in some points. This basically feels, and this deck feels very like teen spirited to me. I talked about it in a different video when I did this for one deck on Wild. This deck feels very much like a time, like maybe my teenage years if they were like bottled up in some way. It's very strange in that way. And it almost, I just was thinking of this the other day, this deck reminds me of basically if you took the essence of like Olivia Rodrigo's Sour album and turned it into a deck, it would basically be this. I don't know why. It kind of would though. But it's just so interesting. See, I kind of don't care for this tower though. That might be one of the reasons why it's at number 4 is because like this deck is stunning. Some of the cards I feel like could have had a little more to them. Maybe they're too minimal, but it still works for me at the same time. I just like how, yeah, fun, teen-spirited, like, but deep at the same time that this deck can be. I think the only reason why it's a lower, despite this deck also, by the way, having a lot of my favorite tarot cards now, just like on them, you know, is because I think I needed to do, again, it's the same thing with the Dungeons & Dragons tarot. I needed more readings with this. I think I use this around April or May, or maybe both, to do some readings and stuff within, like that time of year. Definitely called out to me more that time of year. So because of that, what was I trying to say here? I like lost my train of thought. Because of that, I did use it and I did like it when I used it, but I think for it to have been higher on my list of standouts, again, I just would have needed to use it more. But still a really good one. And if you don't mind this style and it's still available, I think it is, then definitely get your hands on this one. I do recommend it. It's very good. And this was, by the way, for those curious, this was the deck I chose instead of the Lioness Oracle. And I still do not regret it because this really works for me. The size is good. I ended up with both decks anyways, but I just love this one. So yes, Practical Magic. Okay, number 3 on this list. Ooh, okay. This one is an interesting surprise, but I don't think anyone is really surprised because I have shown this a few times. So in this cute Kelly Bear bag, I have my new Zerner Farber Tarot. Okay. This deck is number 3 in my standouts for a very specific reason, okay? This deck is so good. And I don't know how else to like say that, but it is, okay? As you can see, this deck also, just like the Lioness Oracle, has metallic matte edging. It's very beautiful. These are the backs. They are a little simple for my taste. I'm kind of like, okay. Could have been a little better. And the cardstock is, out of all the decks I'm showing, this probably has my least favorite feeling cardstock. But, despite all that, I am mildly in love with this deck. And I think the reason why is, out of all the versions I've ever seen of this deck, this is by far the best and my favorite. So this deck is not new. For anyone who's been in a tarot community a while, for those who are not, let me just say, this deck is not new. It's had a couple different names. I think it's been called simply the Enchanted Tarot at some point, the Enchanted Love Tarot. I think it was Zerner Farber at one point, or just Zerner, or just Farber. I don't remember. It's had a few different names. And each time I saw that deck, or saw people with the deck, it always looked a little different. So this is the newest edition, but there's been an edition where it was super gigantic and large and had like really, I don't think the border suited it, but it was like really big and long. There was a part where it had like different colored, or might have been similarly less bordered. I don't remember. It's had a few, but the sizes on them have always been off. Like one was really small compared to this. I think one was super long, another one being all this kind of weird mumbo jumbo. Anyways, it was all different, all weird. But this one is perfect to me. All the other editions, I kept going, because I kept seeing this artwork though. And I kept thinking, man, that's beautiful, but I don't like those ugly borders and I don't want to chop that deck off, right? I don't like chopping my tarot decks personally. So when this came out, and I knew it was coming out, and I saw it, and I saw the big book it comes with. By the way, it has an amazing guidebook. It's super big. When I saw all that, and I saw the way it looked, even the titles being just blending in with all this amazing like quilted artwork. By the way, this was quilted at one point by, I can't remember who's Zerner and who's Farber. They're a husband and wife team. But when I saw it was created all by her, I was just so impressed. And it's just beautiful. What I like about this deck too, besides just like how perfect it is in size, because by the way, I have small hands, and this deck fits basically in my hands like this and comfortably in my hands. So nicely, so good. It's the perfect size. It's very easy to use because it's still skinnier than it is wide. So it's like easy to hold in the hand. This deck, what I like also is that it really does its own thing. It's not, how to explain this? This deck is almost like trying to invent its own system, because there's some cards like this that from what I've seen of Thoth, it looks like it's vaguely Thoth. But then there's moments where it's more like the RWS. But then there's moments where it looks more Tarot de Marseille style. So this deck really doesn't have, it doesn't want to be pigeonholed, right? It does not want to be pigeonholed in any way, shape, or form. It does its own thing. And I think that's brilliant. Like I said, that's like, it's just good to see more unique decks and to have them around. So, and this moon card and the sun, they're both so beautiful. Love it. Love it. So this is just such a good one. And for that reason, I kind of fell in love with it. Oh, and the cups are that's the only thing that's renamed. They changed it to hearts instead. But it works so well at the same time. It's like really good. This deck also, I haven't done a lot of, but I use this deck a lot, and I kept like wanting to use it again. but I got some pretty profound readings when I did use this deck. Like, this one feels like a certain time and place for me. It feels almost like what my childhood in the mid 90s to early 2000s, like that's the time period I kind of grew up in. And it feels like that time for some reason. There's just something about this deck that calls out to my youth or feels very nostalgic in that way. And so I don't know. I just absolutely love it. I love it so much. And I want to use it even more next year. But it's not higher on the list because the next two you're going to see are even more kind of loves for me. But I am obsessed with this new version of the Zerner Farber Tarot. And I think it's the perfect edition. the perfect one, okay? Okay, that was number 3 on my standouts. Number 2 on this list should surprise literally no one. Literally no one who's been on my channel a while. It shouldn't surprise you. Number 2 on my list, but very close to being number 1 too, is the Tyldwick Tarot. This is the 10th anniversary edition. So it comes in a great 2-piece box like this. It has a little guidebook. That's the only thing about this deck though that kind of like annoys me is look at guys, look at this. Look at how microscopically small. I would literally have to go like this for you guys to actually see. Now you can see what it says. You basically need a magnifying glass to look at this guidebook. So this is my least favorite part about this deck, but I still am absolutely in love with it, okay? So Tyldwick Tarot, as you can see, has these beautiful copper edges. The backs are like this. Really nice matte. It almost feels like art paper, like cardstock. Really good. And what is it? What else can I say about this deck that I haven't already said? I am in love with it. This was like an instant love deck, though. It feels like, because this deck is, so there's no people in this except for statues, right? This deck is basically so different from so many other tarot decks because every part or every card on this deck is a mansion or part of a mansion. It could be a moment where you're just looking at the fireplace and these flagon, is that what they call it? Pints or one of them? And then look, there's a motif in the background of something on the wall, right? Every part of this, every card is just one part of this big manor or mansion or place. And it's just so freaking cool. This is not a deck for everybody because this is a deck that you really need to use your intuition to understand. I would definitely not recommend this as a beginner deck for sure because it is just you need a little bit more. You really have to sit and look at these images to understand what's going on and to really feel, oh, this is, the Ace of Cups. Yes, okay, I get it. Like, not everybody's going to click with this, but I fell immediately in love with this deck. Every time I use this deck, I've had such profound readings with it. It was one of the ones I definitely used a lot this year. And I've even got this, I think, when did I get this? Was this in around August or September? And it was around that same time of year even that I got, you could say like, no, the Zerner Farber, I guess, got around my birthday. It was my birthday. But it was kind of like that later half of the year too. But it like completely stole the show as soon as it came in. So good. Definitely will be using more of this. I don't know how to explain. This is like, this is such a cool deck. Just the concept of it, the way it works, because it's not pigeonholed in one way either. Like, it's so good. But yeah, definitely not a deck for all, but a deck for me, and that's what counts. Right? That's really what it is. But I just love the feel of this one and the feelings it invokes. I don't know. It reminds me of, oh, maybe I will have to do this as like one of those. I'm still trying to plan out my next like recommending books based on tarot decks. There's a few books this reminds me of, so I might have to soon, but I love the Tyldwick, and it rightfully is one of my standouts, and it is in that number 2 position because it's just fantastic. Even production quality. This is probably, out of all the ones I'm showing, this by far has the best production quality, but it's not the star because the other one is going to make the most sense as my number 1 standout of this year, which is also not a surprise to anyone who's been here a while. This is my Northern Animal Tarot. This is the 3rd edition, first printing. I'm saying that specifically because now if you try to get this deck, it does not come in the same cardstock you are going to see. Now it comes in a linen finish, which I kind of would have preferred because it would have made this deck smaller. As you can see, it's very bulky, but I still love it. And the reason why this is my number, and I couldn't, by the way, I could not believe that this was actually, what's it called? I couldn't believe this was a deck from this year. For some reason, I thought I got it last year, but then I looked in my, I looked on my channel and I realized I talked about this deck I got it in January of this year. And so this truly was a standout. I use this deck so much. This deck is the deck I used the most this year. Straight up. That's one reason why it's my standout. I was called to use it the most. Oh, by the way, I have all the, it's because I was studying the quartz. I use this deck the most this year. So that's why it's a standout. But it is also my number 1 standout because this deck was by far the deck that kind of gripped me and didn't let go like this whole year. And I love this Knight of Wands. I always say that every time I see it, but I do. This deck is so good. This doesn't have the linen, but it has this really interesting, as you can see, it's kind of glossy under the lights. But this cardstock is really interesting. It is, I don't know, it's in between matte and smooth. It has this stuff on it, this coating. You can see it in the light. This coating protects it. It's supposed to be more waterproof. So this version of the deck is more waterproof, I guess, compared to, I guess, other decks. I don't know. But she designed it with that in mind. It's more waterproof. And I just love it because the colors are bright. The colors are fantastic on this deck. And I'm in love. I was in love all year round. I wanted to use this all year round. And you know, this deck was just so profound in so many ways. It helped so many people because I did do readings with this deck for others and it did its job. The only thing about it is, yes, it's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. So do I always want to use a Rider-Waite-Smith clone? Well, no, I don't. So I feel like even though this deck was really popular this year, I do have a feeling I will probably end up using it less next year. And the reason why I say that, despite this being my number 1, my standout for this year, is that for tarot, I kind of just want more of the unique decks, like the ones I showed earlier, that don't necessarily follow the same RWS pattern. I want to start trying to use some of those decks more, even the ones that I got more recently in my collection that are also like that. But because this is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, this is very consistent and nice to read with others and for others, especially because it's not the typical like people, it's animals instead. It feels more universal in that way. And I also love these like cool oracle cards that are like mixed in randomly too. This deck is big, okay? But it's so good. And I'm so excited. And by the way, if you didn't know, this creator, at the time of me filming this creator is also coming out with a second deck, the Magical Creatures Tarot. And I shit you not, guys, I was probably one of the first people to fucking back that deck. So that's probably another reason why I won't be using this one as much, because I know she's coming out with a second deck. And that deck will also steal my heart and my money. So there you go. That deck, oh, I'm obsessed because it's going to be magical creatures. Yes, please. That, from what it sounds like, that the soonest that deck would get to me, though, is probably May. The way she's been like producing and is going to be ready. But still, I know I'm probably going to, that deck might end up even, ooh, is that bold to say? Would that deck end up on my standouts for next year? Maybe it will. I have a feeling it could. But because I know that deck is coming out, it's on Kickstarter right now, I know I won't, I probably won't be using this one as much. Not to say I would never use this again, because like I said, this was excellent for reading with other people. It was easy to use because it is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. But yeah, I don't know. I just think next year is the year. I use this so much that I need to give other decks a chance more. So it might need to stop being used for a little bit. But I can't guarantee. This deck does have a very autumnal feel, so maybe I'll have the urge to use it again in autumn of next year, but I think for now I gotta chill out with this one. There's like other decks in my collection I gotta use more, but yeah, this is my number one standout because I used it so much. It was such a great reader for others, and it stole my heart from the beginning of the year to the end, and that's all you can ask for, really. But yeah, those are my standouts, guys. I had a great year of tarot, by the way. I think I had so many good decks that I'm just so happy in that way to have been able to have spent it with such good decks. Like, seriously, some of these decks are just so, they were so good. They were so good. And I just can't see myself, like, I don't know, picking other decks. I'm glad I chose what I chose. And I do think that others, maybe if you like these styles, maybe consider them too, you know? And what am I even doing right now? I'm like taking these all back out. maybe I'll do my, maybe I'll use this image to do my thumbnail. But I'm just going to include these. I'm not going to include the other one. But yeah, these were my standouts. And I loved them so much. And I'm excited to use more of these next year. And use some of my other decks next year. Because I think it's time. I got a lot of new decks this year. And yeah. But yeah, thank you so much. If you're watching, stay tuned again. Because you're going to see I have an Oracle version coming soon of this. But for now, I will say bye.